Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Shemaine Joseph Jackson, and I'm your co-host for this afternoon proceedings. May I kindly request that everyone please rise. In honor of our nation, we value and the values we hold dear, let us all join together in singing the national anthem.
Just for the purpose special request, a lot of us sing the first and last stanza, but on this occasion, we will be singing all the stanzas of the national anthem. Could you please remain standing?
Thank you. My first task this afternoon is to present to you the opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, scholars, dignitaries, those of you following these proceedings online, and fellow citizens, good afternoon. Today, we gather to commemorate the centennial birth anniversary of a son of Guyana whose legacy has transcended time. Lyndon Forbes Burnham was a leader who not only dared to dream, but also took bold steps towards transforming those dreams into tangible reality. He sowed the seeds of national pride, unity, and progress, which we continue to reap and nourish even today. His leadership wasn't simply about governance. It was a narrative of inspiration, dedication, and above all, resilience. President Burnham understood the importance of unity and diversity and the strength that lies in a collective purpose. His unyielding commitment to Guyana's sovereignty and the betterment of its people is a testament to the spirit of a visionary. I see the centennial celebration not merely as a remembrance, but as an invitation to reflect upon our journey as a nation, understand our roots, and continue nurturing the vision of a prosperous and united Guyana. As we delve into the rich tapestry of President Burnham's life and leadership throughout this symposium, let us rekindle the spirit of innovation, collaboration, and patriotism. Like any influential leader, Burnham's legacy is not without contention and debate, marked by periods of both triumphs and tribulations. It is critical, therefore, that we approach our discussions and reflections with a balanced and open perspective, recognizing the multifarious aspects of his life and leadership. We must endeavor to understand the content within which his politics and strategies were formulated, appreciating both the achievements realized and the challenges encountered. Lyndon Forbes Burnham, in his lifetime, planted trees whose shade he knew he might never sit. Today, as we relish the shade and fruits of those trees, we owe it to his memory that our future generations continue planting. In closing, may the symposium not just be a tribute to the past, but also a beacon for the future, guiding by the enduring passion of President Burnham. Today, let us celebrate, reflect, and pledge to carry forward the legacy of a truly visionary leader. Thank you. My next task is to introduce my co-host, Mr. Copeland. I have this distinct pleasure of introducing a dedicated public servant and community leader, serving our community as a city councillor. Mr. Copeland has not only been a voice for our citizens, but has also taken on pivotal leadership roles in various organizations. He is the esteemed vice chair of the Burnham Foundation, where he works diligently to uphold the foundation's mission and values. Moreover, as a chairperson of the Guyana Youth and Student Movement, he has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to empowering our youth and ensuring their voices are heard. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Copeland as my co-host for this afternoon's proceedings.
Thank you very much for such an eloquent, short, well-deserved introduction. Good afternoon, all. Now, before I get into my main task, which is the biography of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, I would just like to acknowledge a few persons in the room, starting with the Honorable Vince Roy Jordan. You could just wave your hand, Member of Parliament, and Vice Chairman of the People's National Council Forum, one Vice Chairman. We have Honorable Karen Cummins, Member of Parliament. We have here the Honorable former Prime Minister, longest-standing Mayor of Georgetown, Hamilton Green. It's this afternoon. I see Comrade Oscar Clark, a long-standing member, also former Minister and General Secretary of the People's National Congress Reform. We have Cheryl Sampson in the front as well, our part of the NCW. I see at the back Dr. Gary Bitts, member of the Central Executive Committee. I also see Royal Volcan, former Minister of Communities. We have Comrade Paris. He said, don't call me her. Comrade Paris there, of course, who's also a former Minister of Education, Ambassador to Russia, etc. I see Alan Ferguson. Sorry, I didn't see you there. The mask. Member of Parliament of the People's National Congress, AP and UFC. I want to also acknowledge Brother Willie Gayan and Sister Pinda, of course, my African grandparents. I see many other persons, of course, in the room. Raul Lucas as well in the room. Who am I missing? If I haven't called your name, I know, of course, I just want to let's all give a round of applause yet again for the Circle of Love. I think they did a very great job when it comes to giving over that national anthem. For all those who are present, members at the University of Guyana, comrades, staff of Congress Place, patrons. It is a pleasure, of course, to co-host this program in commemoration of the founder leader of the People's National Congress Reform, the first executive president of Guyana, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. A great man, a man, of course, who would have done great things for this country, lest we forget. Let me get straight into the biography, which will give you more context on who this man is, where it started and where it went. So as a scholar, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham was born to a headmaster father and a devout Christian mother on February 20th, 1923. His scholastic career is one of the outstanding features of his life. He went from Kitty Methodist School to Central High School and then to Queen's College in 1935, and 1 year later gained the Centenary Exhibition, as well as a government junior scholarship. In 1937, he won the Percival Exhibition Award, and in 1942, he won the coveted Guyana Scholarship. The war prevented him from proceeding to university overseas, and he therefore read externally for a degree from London University. After the war, he proceeded to read law at Gray's Inn, winning a Best Speaker's Cup in the process. But the law could not hold him. Politics was in his blood. Several Caribbean leaders, especially Errol Barrow of Barbados, have testified how Burnham and others tried the sun to be talking on all subjects political. The destiny of Guyana and the Caribbean region claimed his attention. Left-wing politics attract him, and soon Burnham was involved with the youth arm of the Communist Party of Britain and the politics of the Caribbean students. Brilliant lawyer. In 1944, he was awarded the Bachelor of Arts degree at the external examination of the University of London. In 1947, he gained with honors the Bachelor of Laws degree from the same university in 1948. In 1948, at the age of 25, he was admitted to the bar of the Honourable Society of Gray's Inn, London. In 1949, he returned home and was admitted to the local bar. By 1959, he had so established himself as a brilliant lawyer that he was elected president of the Guyana Bar Association. Politics. While a student in London, his keen interest in politics earned him the presidency of the West Indian Students' Union in 1947 and participation as a delegate to the Students' Congress in Prague. In 1947 and in Paris in 1948. On his return to Guyana, he became a co-founder and chairman of the People's Progressive Party. In 1952, he was elected to the Georgetown City Council, where he served as mayor on 2 occasions, in 1959 and in 1964, first executive president. In 1957, he founded the People's National Congress and served as leader of the opposition within the legislature until 1964, when he became premier at the head of the People's National Congress plus United Force Coalition government. When Guyana became independent in 1966, he became prime minister, and with the advent of a new constitution, he was elected the 71st executive president on December 15, 1980, remaining in that position until his death on August 6, 1985. International respect. He earned for his country international recognition and the respect of friends and foes alike for his articulation of commitment to the practice of non-alignment. He made it clear that he was not prepared to sacrifice Guyana's right to determine its own path of political, economic, and social and cultural development. He was also an indefatigable foe of apartheid and was repeatedly praised for the strong support to the liberation struggle in South Africa. Carifesto, Caricom, Carifesto. Within the region, he was a founding father of both Carifesto and Caricom, and was regarded as a regional leader of utmost importance and highest esteem. His was the vision of an integrated Caribbean community of independent people, and he worked hard towards making that vision a reality in quest for cultural independence. Under his leadership, Guyana hosted the first Caribbean Festival of Creative Arts, Carifesto, Women's Rights. He ensured that passing a legislation which gave children born out of wedlock equal rights with those born of wedlock. A state paper on women in 1970 gave birth to 3 laws: the Equal Rights Act, the Family and the Dependents Provision Act, and the Married Persons Property Amendment Act. These acts ensured for women equal rights in all spheres of political, economic, and social life. Concern for youth. His concern for youth was manifested in the establishment of the Guyana National Service, which was meant to give early school leavers additional opportunities and to build in young people a spirit of nationalism and engender a zeal for service to the nation. Awards. He received the Guyana's highest award, the Order of Excellence, OE, in 1973. His work as an internationalist earned him the Grand Cordon de Mille Award from Government of Egypt, the Juris Marty Award from the Government of Cuba in 1975, and the Honorary Doctorate of Law from the Laos University of Canada. 3 countries awarded him their highest awards in October 1983. Brazil honored him with the Coração do Sol in 1984, Bulgaria with the Star of Plene, and in 1985, Yugoslavia with the Order of the Red Star. And that will bring me to the end of the biography we choose to share of the late founder leader of the People's National Congress Forum, the first executive president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. And I believe this man would have laid pillars for most of us who are in this room and for persons who are even unaware of his great work in Guyana. At this time, I'd like to call to the mic Kizia Bacchus, who will also do the bibliographic presentation. Please welcome her, please. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Good afternoon, everyone. All protocols having been established by previous speakers, a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. The University of Guyana Library answered the call of the History Department, Faculty of Education and Humanities to mount an exhibition for the centenary birthday for the late Mr. Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, former president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Indeed, this is not the first such exhibition, as the library mounted a massive exhibition and symposium for the late Dr. Cheddi Jagan, former president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, in 2018 for his centenary birth celebrations. This year, an exhibition was also mounted for the 105th birth anniversary for Dr. Cheddi Jagan, the 103rd birth anniversary for for the late Mistress Janet Jagan, another president of the Corporate Republic of Guyana and wife of Dr. Cheney Jagan. This exhibition, therefore, forms a part of a series of exhibitions mounted by the library for 2023, covering such topics as Indian Immigration Day, the late Walter Rodney, the 1823 Rebellion, the Guyana Prize for Literature, Amerindian Heritage Month, Education Month, the 94th birth anniversary of the late Mr. U. Desmond Hoyt, former president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, CARICOM Day, Arrival Day, World Indigenous Day, among others. To date, some 40 such exhibitions have been mounted internally and externally, all with the aim of publicizing the rich resources resident in the Caribbean Research Library, University of Guyana, a library which has been mandated by law to collect and preserve the nation's rich documented heritage for prosperity. Just a brief note on the Caribbean Research Library, University of Guyana. By law, it was designated one of the 3 legal depositories in Guyana with specific mandate to collect and preserve literature on and about Guyana. Consequently, it seeks to maintain a rich, diverse, and historical collection on Guyana and the Caribbean. Since Guyana is more closely related to its Caribbean neighbors and the flora and fauna of the South American nation, since Guyana is situated on the South American continent and share many similarities with these countries in that area. The collection is vast and spans the spectrum of literature, culture, history, arts, geography, among others. The exhibition mounted for today's occasion showcases a selection of works on and about the late Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham and focuses on his tenure before, during, and after Guyana's independence. It displays some of his speeches and addresses as Premier of British Guyana, 1964 to 1966, Prime Minister of Guyana, 1964 to 1980, and the first Executive President, 1980 to 1985. It showcases some of the speeches made to the nation in these capacities on a wide variety of issues that could contribute to the dialogue on the territorial issues, Venezuela and Guyana, Venezuela-Suriname, regional integration, harnessing the country's rich resources, the non-aligned movement, among others. Of significant note are the 3 volumes of the Guyana's Classic published in 2012 by the Caribbean Press for the government of Guyana on his National Assembly speeches from 1957 to 1962. The collection includes newspapers, articles, books, book chapters, book reviews, journals, interviews, broadcasts, and conference papers that speak to his contribution and policies as Premier, Prime Minister, and Executive President, including records of ceremonies, memorabilia that speak to the active life of the late Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Please feel free to visit and or contact the Caribbean Research Library for any information you may need. Visit us on the library's website or on Facebook for further information on this collection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bacchus, for that. I believe you need give me one more applause. I believe you must note history. As we say in Sankofa, you must know where you came from to know where you're heading. At this point in time, we get into the meat of this symposium for the Burnham Centenary. And I'd like to call a very important individual, someone we believe is very knowledgeable of the founder leader, the man called Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. This gentleman that I'm about to call is no other than the chairman of IPADG, International Day of the People of African Descent, Guyana. He is a GCOM commissioner on behalf of the AP and UAFC. He's also the chairman for the Burnham Centennial Committee, which would have planned and organized this event and so many other events to mark Burnham's 100th year if he was alive today. And more specifically for this event, he is also the chairman of the Burnham Foundation. His presentation will be done remembering Burnham, the Hawkeye Vision. Let's all invite a round of applause for Mr. Vincent Alexander.
All protocols have been observed. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. As indicated, my presentation is entitled Remembering Burnham, the Hawkeye Vision. Burnham birthed on February 20th, 1923, and departed on August 6th, 1985, a mere 62 years after. Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham has been many things to many who knew him and or read about him. However, that he was an enigma sums up the myriad and kaleidoscopic nature of the man. 38 years after his passing, his being, maybe his enigmatic being, may be described as a consensual biographic description of the man, albeit abstract and daunting. The Hawkeye, or the third eye in this narration, is the methodology used to replay life occurrences in an effort to pronounce on them. Today's Hawkeye, as a means of remembering Burnham, is intended to review pronouncements, comments, and statements that record moments of his life, which may create a kaleidoscopic and mosaic portrayal of his enigma. Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. In that pursuit, the third person, the third empire, and his Hawkeye will be relied upon for the replay of actual occurrences and the portrayal of the man called Bordeaux. Hazel Wilford, in her publication Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, his rich legacy of education and culture, quoted David Ford thus: he, Burnham, had spent some time at Central High School. He had won a primary scholarship, and it never became clear to me why he was not at QC from the beginning of the term. She further indicated that the fees at Queen's College were very high, and Burnham disciplined himself to earn grades which would qualify him for scholarships in order to maintain and remain his studentship in the school. Burnham won the Centenary Scholarship 1936, Government Junior Scholarship 1937, and the Percival Exhibition 1938. From the very inception, there were discernible attributes of Burnham: his love for education, his scholastic ability, and his commitment and dedication. No wonder his sister described him as ambitious. albeit with insinuations. His early experiences also informed his subsequent concern about the inaccessibility of the low-income citizens to education. These qualities and concern would prevail and influence his policy initiatives, such as free education from nursery to university, when he occupied positions of authority. His copying the British Guiana Scholarship in 1942, after attaining the highest grades in the senior Cambridge examination, and his exhibition of skills in oratory and leadership, which resulted in him gaining the Best Speaker's Cup at the University of London in 1946, and his elevation to the leadership of the West Indian Student Union in London, were clear indications of his emergence as an exceptional public figure. Shirley Patterson, a former Minister of Government, commenting on Burnham's potential in 1966, opined that as early as 1946, the young man was revealing the talent after which Guyanese would later call so insistently. Leadership seemed to fit the young man like the proverbial glare. What has been stated hitherto speaks to his persona and insipid manifestation of his profundity and industry. Shahabuddin, who first encountered Burnham whilst he, Shahabuddin, was a student in London, had this to say about Burnham. His presentation was reasoned, his facts well marshaled, his arguments real, his manner scholarly, almost judicial. Like so many others, I had no difficulty in recognizing him as a decidedly superior in talent. He was a man with deep historical roots in our people and in our country. It is this, I think, which primarily gave him his drive and strength and conviction and general orientation. In subsequent commentary on Burnham, who by 1949 had returned home and shortly after assumed local, professional, and national leadership roles, Shahabuddin came to the following conclusions. He lost no occasion to dwell on the need to exorcise our minds of any sense of inferiority or dependency on others elsewhere. He was, of course, mature enough to recognize that this wrench in orientation might involve us in errors over and above the level which may be considered normal or tolerable in a long-settled society. But he thought that the possibility of erring was not so much a risk as a right to be exercised as an integral part of the process of growing up. He was such a person who Ramji Chandi Singh opined was able to secure and maintain political independence, achieve republicanism, defend our sovereignty and territorial integrity. In that process, Hoyt articulated that he waged a relentless struggle at home against prejudice, discrimination, vested interests, and all arrangements which entrenched or perpetuated social injustice. It was an important matter of principle, therefore, for him to remove all legal disabilities and discriminatory consequences flowing therefrom that affected women and children born out of wedlock merely by reason of status. Hoyt also commented on his manner of conduct of the nation's business. Frequently in those hard-fought debates, which were an essential and living part of our internal democracy, I've seen him being strong, only gracefully to concede after arguments and debate was the very stuff of his life, and the challenges of an opposing view was the fuel of his intellect. Hoyt further contended, he taught us that development begins in the mind, and that our first duty was to free our minds of the psychological shambles of the colonial past and assume our own responsibility and respect ourselves, our fellow citizens, our country, and all things cultural and national that are our own. It is against that background that he gave leadership in the process of nation building. In that regard, Dr. Reed made the following observations. Look around, and you will see his many creations. What men talked about, what men theorized, Burnham constructed. Be it Hoyt, Shahabadin, or Reed, they all seem to be commentators on the growth of an exceptional person, a thinker and a doer, a motivator and a respondent. This is evident in the myriad projects and developments that were undertaken during his reign and under his leadership in response to the needs of the country and the satisfaction of his own quest to be a nation builder. The publications, Guyana, A Decade of Progress, 1974, and 20 Years of Development, Progress Never Ceases, 1984, summarize them thus. Amerindian integration and development, creating an identity, the FTA strife, changing of trade partners, the experiencing of national ownership and control, the establishment of local financial institutions, improvement of the health services, provision of potable water supply, rural electrification, social security, self-help and cooperatives, contributions to world affairs, reorganizing of the nation's education system, mobilization of the disciplined forces for the defense of our territorial integrity. All of the aforementioned were premised on the philosophical underpinnings of cooperativism and the complementary national policies such as non-alignment, non-interference in internal affairs, diversification of the economy, social infrastructure development, access to education for all, the cultivation of a national identity and national unity, gender and ethnic equality, freedom of conscience and religious practices, control over our natural resources, embracing the anti-colonial and liberation struggles. As exemplified by the establishment of national institutions and the implementation of programs such as religious holidays, national service, the National Insurance Scheme, the Institute of Applied Science and Technology, free education from nursery to tertiary, local government reform, the People's 1980 Constitution, the African Liberation Fund, the Indigenous Court of Appeal, self-help housing schemes, drainage and irrigation schemes, it is for those initiatives and achievements that upon his demise, the following observations were made and tributes paid. The Indian High Commissioner stated, Burnham was a responsible leader who led his people through a difficult period of time to establish their identity. The head of the federal military government and commander-in-chief of the Special Forces of Nigeria stated, he was an indefatigable father for the lowly and opposed wherever, and his total support for African liberation particularly endeared him to the South African leaders. His concerns stretched beyond the Caribbean to the liberation forces in South Africa, which struggled for freedom he supported. It is this unflinching commitment to critical assistance for which history will remember Lyndon Forbes Samson Burnham. That was the tribute of the Executive Director of the Canadian Foundation for Caribbean Development and Cooperation. Forbes Burnham has been a valued colleague in the Commonwealth and a positive and dynamic voice in the Third World for political and economic emancipation, opined the President of the Republic of Gambia. Fidel Castro was moved to remark that with his death, Guyana lost one of its prominent sons, the Caribbean and Latin America, an outstanding statesman, and the Cuban people, an affectionate friend who knew to maintain fairness in difficult times for our peoples in defense of non-intervention and sovereignty. Three compassionate comments were, like many political leaders the world over, Forbes Burnham was thought to be hostile to criticism. But in some measure, that must be true. But I often felt that it was less a reality than a myth, which he did little to defend. With the result that he often received from those around him much less by way of candid criticism, which would have helped him, were the parting words of Sir Shridat Ramphal. The President, in his wisdom, realized that self-sufficiency was the correct strategy for development, and he simply believed that Guyana could be self-sufficient if we use the indigenous material. That thought came from the lips of Gus Lee, a corporate leader. A formal indigenous court of appeal was an integral element of the concept of independence. It was also his contention that the establishment of a Caribbean Court of Appeal would not prove to be viable unless it came about as a part of arrangements designed to achieve an appropriate level of political and constitutional integration, was the stunning conclusion of Mohammed Shahabuddin, a legal luminary in his own right. President Hoyt posthumously proffered that Burnham was reliably and splendidly endowed with those rare and special faculties that are reserved only for leaders of men and makers of history. He was a prodigious intellect, free, probing, receptive to new ideas and new possibilities. However, none of those tributes address what was preeminent at the time of his passing. Halim Majid drew attention to what was preeminent thus. But the fact that President Burnham made another attempt in 1984-85 to engage the PPP in political dialogue and power sharing tells a story of magnanimity, pragmatism, and personal concern for the national weal. At the top of his agenda was healing and building a unified Guyana, a challenge still confronting our nation. Given all else, was that evidential or paradoxical to his nature? However, though his earthly remains were in turn, his pursuit, his spirit is not moribund. Our laureate poet, Martin Carter, fittingly bade him farewell thus: death must not find us thinking that we die. The Hawkeye deems Burnham not out, since his ideas and achievements are still evident today. In those effigies that adorn our landscape and the ongoing debates about our path to the development of Guyana, he remained not out at the close of his innings. The enigmatic, myriad, kaleidoscopic mosaic, like a rough diamond and in pure gold, remains under dissected, but available for ongoing exploration in Guyana's quest for a genuine way forward in its thrust towards nationhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Vincent Alexander, for that keynote address. Remembering Burnham, the Hawkeye vision. And I believe Lumen Forbes Samson Burnham had a really in-depth vision beyond his time. And if he would have lived a bit longer, I believe his vision and his intentions, his ideologies would have taken Guyana much further. And we've seen under his leadership how Guyana has been transformed. Even today, we still benefit from the Linen-Suzdike Highway, the Warra Harbor Bridge, the Cultural Center, the fact that we all can enjoy our national holidays irrespective of our religious beliefs, backgrounds, and traditions. So he's a man to celebrate. At this point in time, I'd like to call a young woman to the podium. She is a brilliant mind, gives service to this country through the GDF. She's a part of the Young Reparations Commission and also Kimba, the first youth reparation organization in the Caribbean. Help me welcome Crystal Crawford to give us a poem.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Kibui. I'm always humbled and honored whenever I'm asked to share a piece because I never considered myself as a poet. I just wrote because of how I felt, and that's the only way I knew how to express myself. So in the year 2020, I was asked to do a piece about Mashramani under the theme, Guyana Together, Reflect, Celebrate, Transform. So I wanted to get a view or just to read about this person, Burnham, that I always heard about. So I visited the National Archives. And whilst there, I asked, show me an article written by this person, Mr. Burnham. So I read the article and I was really surprised. Like the words were talking to me. It was like if I was there at the National Park. So this poem is inspired by that. Guyana Together, Reflect, Celebrate, Transform, the Year of Jubilee. It was the midnight of February 22, 1970. The new era, a new time ushered in with a 21-gun salute, the hoisting of the golden arrowhead. Guyana, the cooperative republic, standing on a pedestal, Sir Edward Loco read the proclamation. History, Guyana, no longer stuck with the governor, but will now elect an executive president. Sovereignty, no longer in a monarch, but its people. Guyana, the cooperative republic. The birth of a nation, a revealing of a plaque. The vision of a leader, no longer a colony, but a country. Guyana, the free. Governor Kofi, 257 years ago, the first to fight for freedom. Governor Kofi, the father of the republic. Governor Kofi, the hero of our peace. Governor Kofi, 23rd February, 1763. 100 years ago, Burnham, in honor of a great man, not a slave, but a leader, a visionary, a fighter, the initiator, the true hero of a Republican anniversary, democracy. Let's celebrate the history, the legacy of Jubilee, the freedom in its name, the power in its call, the year of Jubilee, Guyana, oil and free. To truly celebrate, one must know what they are celebrating. So if you don't know, just let me tell you, we are celebrating the birth of a nation, a republican status, the anniversary of a prince, the remembrance of a governor, a Ghanaian heritage, that rose above its oppression, that rose above its circumstances, a country that rose above its chain of rule. Can you imagine the floats, the costumes? Can you imagine your granny gyrating to the rhythm of the beat, or the ethnic dances of the Amerindians? That is Guyana, not hailing a queen, but saluting the talent of our land. That is the Republican freedom. Let's transform this land into its God-given potential, no longer the scorn of the Caribbean, but the jewel of the world. Let's make our nation great, not again, but forever. And how do we do that? We first need to respect ourselves, respect our country, respect our people. We need to stop littering, stop sharing slander, clean your surroundings, hold your leaders accountable. But above all, you need to vote. I see Minister, hi. You need to know your history, know your culture, know your worth. Then and only then can we make progress as a nation, no longer me and you, but we, us, a true republic, born in the land of the mighty Roraima, land of great rivers, far-stretching seas, so like the mountain, the sea, and the river, great, wide, and deep, in our lives would we be. Onward, upward, may we ever go, day by day in strength and beauty grow, till at length we each of us will show what Guyana's sons and daughters can be. Oh, beautiful Guyana! Oh, my lovely native land! More dear to me than all the world, thy sea-washed, sun-kissed strand, or down upon the borders, looking out upon the deep, the great Atlantic, blown into a fury, or asleep, at morn, at noon, or better in the crimson sunset's glow. I love thee. Oh, I love thee. And I need you to help me with this last one, please. We need to sing. Let us cooperate for Guyana. Let us cooperate. See, we do it right together. Yes, we can. Each man wants to with. Each man wants to his bit for his land. Each must resolve to learn to call his neighbor brother. Can we do it? Yes, we can. Each group must do its best for the region. Each must sacrifice a little, learn to without a little. Can we do it? Yes, we can. The regions must unite for the country. The regions must unite for the has its chosen mission, but they all have one ambition. Can we do it? Yes. I can't hear you. Can we do it? Can we do it? Thank you.
At this time, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Alfred Mentor, Mayor of Georgetown. Today, we are in for a treat, a musical treat. The Yoruba singers are iconic figures, representing not just captivating rhythm, but also a rich tapestry of cultural narratives. Amongst the illustrious members, we have Ezzy Rockcliffe, whose voice and passion have added a unique dimension to their performances. This afternoon, Ezzy Rockcliffe of the Yoruba Singers will grace us with a rendition that promises to be both soul-searching and memorable. Let the music transport you. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ezzy Rockcliffe.
Is there anybody here? See my old friend Lyndon. Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seemed the good die young. I just look around and he was gone. Is there anybody here? She's my old friend Forbes Burnham. Can't you tell me where he's gone? He pleased a lot of people, but it seemed a good thing young. I just look around, I looked around, and he was gone. Is there anybody here? Seen my old friend Samson. Can you tell me where he's gone? He pleased a lot of people, but it seemed a good that young. I just look around and he was gone. Didn't we love the things he stood for? Didn't he try to make some good for you and me be free? Is there anybody here? See my old friend Forbes Burnham. Can you tell me where he's gone? He pleased a lot of people, but it seemed the good, the young. I just look around and he was gone. I just look around and he was gone. I just look around and Lyndon Pope Samson Burnham was gone.
Thank you, Mr. Rockcliffe. I think he needs another applause. ladies and gentlemen, as we progress into a pivotal segment of today's symposium, I am honored to introduce our esteemed panel, who will be delving deeper into the theme of the symposium, the centennial celebration of a visionary leader. Each of these individuals bring a wealth of knowledge, experience, and insight to the table, and I'm certain we're in for a thought-provoking session. The first panelist is Mr. Dwayne Benjamin. Mr. Benjamin is currently a lecturer in the Department of History and Caribbean Studies. His specialization is in Caribbean Studies, and he has shared an educational background that includes a Bachelor of Arts in History, a postgraduate diploma in Development Studies from the University of Ghana, and a Master in Political Economy from the University of Sydney. Please welcome Mr. Benjamin to the podium. All right, cool. The second panelist is Mr. Dwayne Edwards. Dr. Edwards is a senior lecturer in the Department of Sociology at the University of Ghana. He lectures both undergraduate and graduate courses in social theory and research. His research areas include ethnic dynamics in plural societies, the social implications of Caribbean philosophical and development thought, and socio-cultural systems in developing societies. His main research project explores the theoretical linkage between social differentiation and identity politics. He holds a PhD in sociology from the University of the West Indies, Cayville, and a Bachelor of Science in sociology from the University of Ghana. I'm sure you share my enthusiasm in looking forward to the wealth of knowledge they're about to share. Without further ado, I hand you over to these two panelists.
So I will be moderating this particular aspect of the program. And you've heard the credentials of both Mr. Benjamin and Mr. Edwards. And of course, they will give their critical analogy or analysis of the keynote speech, or maybe add and so forth. So I give them the floor. They have about 8 minutes each to do their presentation. Yes, only 8 minutes. And we then go into a Q&A session.
All protocols observed. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. I'm told that I was given 8 minutes to speak. And I think that speaking about Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, our very first president, you could probably spend a whole entire day. So I think it might be a bit unfair. Nevertheless, I'll try. I'll try to keep it in the time. Now, the keynote address by Mr. Vincent Alexander, chairman of Burnham Foundation, give us some great insights into the vision and the trust of Burnham, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, in building this great nation of ours. But my presentation is intended to basically expand on one aspect of Burnham's vision, and that has to do with food import substituted agriculture, which agriculture was one of the main pillars of Burnham's policy approach to development, one of the main pillars of his vision. And that agriculture, and more importantly, import substituting agriculture, emerged as a solution to the problems of the economic crisis, food shortages, and increased prices of food imports, and other challenges that face not only Guyana, but many other developing countries during the 1970s, and more specifically in 1972, at the height of the first oil crisis. Now, the import substituting agriculture was conceived within the context of cooperative socialism and was pursued as part of Guyana's second development plan of 1972-76, that is known as the FCH plan, the Feed, Clothe, and House the Nation plan. Take a quotation from Dennis Canterbury in 2007. He stated that, speaking to the policy of import substituting agriculture, he noted that the government policy in agriculture revolved around the objective of national self-sufficiency in food, in which the state aimed to be able to feed all Guyanese by 1976. Incidentally, however, this plan was conceived in 1972, but was never implemented until 1974. Now, what are some of the rationales behind food import substituting agriculture? Firstly, it was a matter of economic survival, mainly macroeconomic survival, given the crisis that the economy faced at the time. And like I said, mainly the oil crisis, as well as the increased cost of importing food, as well as the inflation that follows that. But more importantly, it was an attempt to diversify the economy away from the heavy reliance of rice, sugar, bauxite, and gold, and to essentially expand agriculture for two purposes. Agriculture was expanded for, firstly, domestic consumption, as well as surplus to be exported abroad. And that is why in some instances, they were the talk about Guyana being the breadbasket of the Caribbean. Also, it was geared towards employment creation. And in fact, this was achieved between 1972 and 1982, when employment in agriculture rose from 28% to 43% in 1982. But more importantly, food and food production at a local level was very much part of the thrust towards decolonization, the whole effort towards essentially, well, decolonization in the true sense, economic, political, as well as cultural and culinary, which meant that in this instance, it meant replacing foreign tastes with local tastes. Now, the philosophical foundations underpinning food import substitution agriculture are based firstly on cooperative socialism, in which was a development strategy articulated, well, an approach to development articulated by Linda Forbes Sampson Burnham that saw the creation of a tri-sector economy in which there was a private sector, there's the government, and the cooperative sector essentially sovereign as the balance between the state and the ordinary folks in the grassroots. But it was also based on the philosophy of self-reliance. And like I said earlier, it was part of the FCH Feed, Clothe, and House the Nation plan. But it was also geared towards achieving equity and equitable development. And those were the philosophical foundation underpinning the food import substitution agriculture. Now, in terms of the implementation of the FCH plan was between 1974 up until 1978, 79. That was supposed to be the implementation period, during which there were several strategies that were adopted towards achieving those goals. Firstly, there was the import restriction on certain food commodities that were mainly imported, such as wheat, canned tunas, oil, split beans, corn, amongst others. There was a heavy state investment in agriculture, and basically the government took the lead role in encouraging two things: encouraging the development of kitchen gardens in the urban areas, as well as promoting extensive agricultural cultivation in rural areas. In that, it was essentially distribution of seeds, to farmers, giving fertilizer subsidies, as well as building the necessary infrastructures to support agricultural production. Thirdly, there was the creation of institutions to support agriculture, mainly the marketing boards, the creation of Guyana Agricultural Bank, and also numerous co-op banks that give adequate or ensured farmers access to the necessary financing, be it individual or by cooperatives, to support agricultural production. There was a public awareness campaign also in the form of the creation of the Guyana Agency for Health, Education, and Food Policy, which was formerly the Department of Food and Nutrition. But also an integral part of this whole agriculture and food production was the role of military and paramilitary organizations such as the Guyana National Service, the Guyana People's Militia, and the Guyana Police Force, as well as the Guyana Defense Force, that give support and in some cases were encouraged to be engaged in agricultural production in an effort to sustain those very institutions. Now, when we look at the balance sheet of the FCH plan, mainly the approach to food production, there's some in the literature that state that the plan was a failure. But looking at the data available from the Bank of Guyana reports between 1972 and 1985, there have been significant increases in those commodities that were produced locally. And just to give example, rice, ground provisions, plantains, bananas, citrus, pineapples, tomatoes, and some case, and well, more importantly, cabbages, which weren't available prior to 1972. In fact, most of the cabbages that were consumed prior to 1972 were imported. In terms of the output of manufactured agricultural commodities, again, we see significant decrease in those commodities that were imported, such as margarine, flour, copper meal, stock feeds, etc. Edible oil. Those were commodities that had to be imported for domestic consumption. And during the period between 1972 and 1985, there was significant decline in the imports of those commodities. And in fact, what replaced those in some cases were local commodities or local products that could have been utilized. So for example, in the case of wheaten flour, it was the government encouraged the development of cassava flour, corn flour, plantain flour. In terms of breakfast cereals, which was imported from outside of Guyana, rice, cornmeal, and plantain was also used as breakfast cereals. Milk, which was another commodity that was heavily imported, was produced with the formation of the Litco company that produced Litco milk, and that cut significantly the import of milk. But also had the encouragement of goat and cow milk. Split peas was replaced by pigeon peas and black-eyed peas, which was produced by GNS, as well as in some villages on the Essequibo Coast and in Berbice and elsewhere. Imported coconut oil was replaced by coconut oil, as well as experiment with palm oil. Now, all of this would geared towards achieving self-sufficiency and making use of the indigenous resources that were available to support development, but also to ensure that there was some amount of increased food availability within the domestic market. I think in today's literature is referred to as food security, and it has a much wider connotation than back in 1972, where essentially the emphasis was on the availability of food. Now, looking at the impact, and further looking at the impact of Burnham's approach to, Burnham's food import substitution agriculture. Between 1972 and 1985, food as a percentage of total export somewhat experienced fluctuating fortunes, starting at 49% in 1972, 48% by 1978, but by 1985 was 42.5%. But what is more important, however, is when you look at the import side, food import was 13.9% of total imports into Guyana. That is in 1972. By the time we got to 1982, it was a mere 1.9%, which is a significant reduction in terms of import and a significant save in terms of foreign exchange. However, by the time we got to 1985 and the full effect of the crisis and the economic crisis at the time would have kicked in, that would have increased to 16.3%.
1 minute
Now-
remaining, Mr. Bradbury.
Yes, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to wrap it up. Now,
I can give him some.
look. Yes, I'm going to wrap it up now. What I want to talk about basically is I want to talk about some of the failures, why, because we've seen the positive side of the policy, but what are some of the downside? And I want to talk about, basically take a quotation from Professor Ralph Prendas. He argued that the policy, Burnham policies general, not just the food policy, but general policy, general policies of Burnham fell victim to the ethnic politics that existed at the site. And I find this very convenient here because one of the things about agriculture is that it depended heavily on the rural areas, on rural production. And invariably, the political environment at the time was hostile towards, especially in the rural areas, was hostile towards Linda Forbes Samson Burnham, especially coming in the height of the crisis, the economic crisis, as well as the contentious 1973 elections, that in some cases, the legitimacy of the state was challenged. But nevertheless, however, in all of this, we cannot underestimate the impact of the oil crisis first in 1972 and 1978. In fact, by the time we got to the 1980s, some literature state that Guyana economy was in collapse, but then it was not only Guyana. In fact, the UN recognized the 1980s as a lost decade. So I think that looking back from a eyes view, I would say that the policy of food import substitution laid the foundation for the post-independence expansion of agriculture in Guyana. It was not the best. In fact, some people might argue that Burnham was extremely ambitious given the crisis and given the fact that his approach to development was heavily statist in the sense that the government probably bit off more than they can chew, and that cooperative socialism collapsed under its own weight. That very well be one criticism that might be applicable when we look at food import substitution, notwithstanding the political environment, notwithstanding the international environment and the domestic environment. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benjamin. We now hand it over to Dr. Edwards to do his bit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Right off the bat, I need to follow in the footsteps of my colleague, Dwayne Benjamin. People usually confuse us. They usually call me Dwayne Benjamin at times. So rather than take the broad approach that our esteemed colleague took and gave a kind of archive panoramic view of Burnham and his accomplishment, starting from his very young age, his intellectual abilities and attainment, and his political and other abilities and attainment. What I will do, I will zoom in on one or two aspects of Burnham's ideas and to discuss to what extent those are still relevant in the context of current Guyana. And the focus is to attempt to marshal these ideas in the service of a Guyana that Burnham himself attempted and contributed immeasurably in building. In the context of present-day Guyana, what ideas associated with him, though not necessarily originated with him, would be relevant. And in order to do that, I have to describe what is this context I talk about. But before that I'm talking about, but before I do that, I want to make reference to a quote from Mr. Vincent Alexander's presentation. And it goes, what men talked about, what men theorized, Burnham constructed. And this is so relevant because when Mr. Benjamin spoke about Burnham's import substitution approach to our economic development, he was really giving life to ideas espoused by many of our development theorists within the Caribbean, starting with Sir Arthur Lewis, continuing with Lloyd Best and George Beckford. And those are some of the most radical economic thinkers within the Caribbean sphere. But getting back to the focus of my presentation is marshalling one or two of Burnham's ideas in the context of current-day Guyana. What do I mean by current-day Guyana? We all know that Guyana is in economic transition. It's in social transition. Time does not permit me to speak in any length on any of these. In fact, I would have to totally delete my part on the social transition. But let's concentrate on the economic transition. We have fortunately, or for some, unfortunately, added another commodity to the list of commodities that we have historically depended on and exploited. We're known as primary commodity exporter, and we've depended, economically speaking, on the exploitation of these for the maintenance of our livelihood. With the addition of this new commodity, which is, you all know, oil, in less than 5 years after production, Ghana has moved from being a middle income to a high income country, according to World Bank classification. Most of the economic or the macroeconomic fundamentals seem to be trending in the right direction. The formal economy seems to be doing well. The same cannot be said, however, for what I want to term here the real economy or the microeconomy. And this conflicting reality raises the question about the extent to which composite indices such as GDP mask the more troublesome problems of the distribution of wealth in an economy. And this is a debate that is ongoing in economics, in sociology, in politics, and so forth. While the macroeconomic fundamentals look flowery and promising, real economic agents are crying out about inflation, low wages, minimum wage, high taxation, and the list goes on. This begs the question, what is being done with the influx of monies occasioned by the addition of this new commodity? And from in 2022 was like 1 billion alone from the exploitation of that new addition. And I need you to think about that in the context that like pre-2015, our entire budget was about 1 billion US. So think about currently just one commodity provides that 1 billion for us. So think about that massive increase of wealth. The question is, what is being done with this newfound wealth? If you look at how we're spending our money, if you look at the budget, a large cross-section of that goes towards infrastructural development. All over the country you go, you would see roads, bridges, especially are being constructed. Right? Infrastructural development seems to trump what development theorists call human development or human capital development. Which seems, and this approach, the infrastructural as opposed to the human or human capital, this approach seems to be the opposite to the approach taken by what are called converging developing countries. Those are those developing countries in the global south, which have also happened to a large extent transform their economies and lift their people out of poverty by and large, right? And they took a totally different opposite approach. Their approach was the emphasis on human development, human capital development, to the extent that development theorists refer to their approach as a development revolution from the global south. So we seem to be taking an approach directly opposite to even our neighbors, or our brothers and sisters in the global south, and such as Brazil, India, places like those. That said, I want to recall my own experience in traveling to a country that in many ways mirror what we're going through in Guyana. In 2015, I traveled to Ghana. I was part of the 8th Pan-African Conference. I spent some time there beyond the conference time, just to get a feel of the country. It's important to note that Ghana found oil in commercial quantities in 2007 and started production in 2010. That's a good decade before Guyana. Moreover, just like Ghana, before oil, Ghana depended on other minerals, just as we depended on gold, bauxite, and so forth. Ghana also, previous to finding oil in commercial quantities, depended on these minerals. Although Guyana and Ghana had access to gold and other minerals before oil, both countries had continued to experience severe economic challenges, Guyana more than Ghana. So when I visited Ghana in 2015, there were certain things that I was really impressed by. And of course, there were certain things that that I was taken aback by. Just like Guyana, there was euphoria coming from all sections of society, and the public sphere was dominated by the development discourse that tried to centralize the expectations, or to spread expectations of unprecedented wealth, development of key institutions, and development of infrastructure. And I need to emphasize the development of infrastructure here. The things that I was impressed by, of course, was the road network. It had a massive, impressive road network because, of course, the investment in infrastructure. And there was a proliferation, or at least a seeming proliferation, of both public and private educational institutions, which means that they paid a lot of attention, the education sector, and infrastructure associated with it. I was taken aback, however, by constant power outages. Sometimes power was off for the entire day, right? And then before the day is out, it would come on for a couple hours. Then you started rush to take that couple hours to charge your cell phone, charge your lights, and so, because they depended a lot on chargeable like lamps and things like that. So yes, and the Ghanaians refer to this crisis as the doomsday crisis. Doomsday is translated as on-off, switch on, switch off, kind of. This was amazing, since Ghana had access not only to oil and gas, but Ghana also had access to hydropower. In 2018, almost 40% of total grid power was generated from hydropower in Ghana. This was accounted for by 3 hydropower stations. It stands as one of the most hydro-rich countries in the world, yet access to electrical power has been highly politicized. It was used to buy votes, vote buy-in. Regions with swing votes were more likely to have supply than other regions. So the politicization of power distribution. So along with the very impressive road networks, and this is what struck me, these roads were littered with young, sometimes school-age children selling bottled water, and other conveniences to passerby. This suggests high level of unemployment in the western region, which is the capital, which forces you to adopt every means, including illegal means, to survive and to maintain livelihood. So, in a word, it had infrastructure, but it lacked a human development superstructure, right? And that's when I talk about Burnham ideas. One of the things that no one could accuse Burnham of lacking is that human development superstructure.
1 minute to wrap up.
Time to wrap up? Okay, wrapping up. So if you look at Guyana with this emphasis on infrastructural development, it smacks too much of neoliberal capitalism, which encourage us to, or encourage government to invest mainly or merely in the infrastructure, which could enable the smooth flow of capital, goods and services, and allow the market to generate everything else. It means that, by and large, real economic agents, the real people, the small man, which in Burnham's sense should become the real man, or the small person, the real person, they are left to the mercies of those who control capital. Right? So if you look at Guyana, we are shifting more and more away from Amartya Sen's notion of development as freedom and as the exercise of capabilities, and more back towards a neoliberal approach to development, which surrenders our real people, real persons, to the mercies of those with capital. Because I have to wrap up, I will have to sum up. So my point here is that we need to revert, or we need to revisit, and this has to start with, of course, discussion in the public sphere. We need to, for it to be known that the approach to governing and managing our oil wealth must not be dictated by the moneyed classes in Guyana, but normal people, real people, must add their discourse to how our resources should be managed in a way which centralizes our needs, centralizes our ideas, centralizes our vision of a new, vibrant, and cohesive society. And I'll have to stop here. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I also have to go, Vincent. I have to go.
Okay, you have to go?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, we wouldn't want to hold you back from your flight. But for the persons who are saying, why stop them? Why give them so limited time? Their time to engage you is not over. Their time for the initial thoughts is over. But now we give you the chance to ask questions or any follow-up so they can maybe elaborate more. I know Mr. Benjamin dealt a lot with the agriculture. You know, Burnham was very much on planting. You would hear the stories of him riding on the horseback, planting food, giving persons seeds or sticks. And I think that was very instrumental. Of course, Dr. Edwards dealt into the whole aspect of the economics of things. Burnham took over Guyana, was a leader in Guyana when the world was dealing with a financial crisis, not only Guyana. I think most persons are unaware of that. How would we deal with our resources even today? Having oil, we could still suffer. So I'll now open the floor for those who would like to ask any questions. And if we could maybe direct our first question to Dr. Edwards before he leaves, if he has the time, even if it's a minute or two, I'll open the floor. Who would like to ask the first question? Comrade Hines.
I didn't want to start the question session, but Dr. Edwards and Mr. Benjamin, only today, a friend of mine asked me a question. I was on my way to the bank. He asked me, he said, listen, how is it a little boy can control a horse? I said, because he has the bit in the mouth. He said, no. He said to me, because the horse doesn't know its strength. I said, that's an interesting answer. But I start by saying that based on what you, Dr. Edwards, just said. The thrust of the current state of affairs in terms of development seem to be focusing on infrastructure. And quite rightly, you categorize the approach taken by Forbes Burnham in that of being the human consideration played very high on his trust to development. Now, my question to you, sir, having listened to this little story I heard this morning, what in your academic studies and what in your research do you think can be the right balance for the country in relation to the current newfound wealth? I'll stop there for now.
All right. Thank you. Well, infrastructure has to be a part of it, no doubt. But I think priorities should be placed on the human side of things. And that's based on the history of exploitation of our people. We come from an history of slavery, colonialism, exploitation, one form of exploitation after another, right? And because of that, we lived through times when we were a highly indebted, poor country and things like that. So we've passed through various stages or phases of struggle. And that history alone should dictate that any development trust should center the people, the needs of the people, and the development of the capabilities of the people, even as we invest in other areas of life. Right? It's not that we should not invest in it. We have to, because if you look at you look at the roads, the physical and social infrastructure, we need investment in these parts, right? But they should keep the investment in human resources. Well, I don't like to use the term resources, but the investment in human and human capabilities should keep pace with our investment in these other areas of life. Unfortunately, I have to go, I have to fly, and you know these flights don't wait for persons, right? So I would have glad to sit longer and engage you, and but unfortunately I have to go.
Good afternoon. I know I came late, but I just wanted to make one or two comments. Infrastructure is a very important component of development. And when one considers where the PNC was when the PNC got into government, infrastructure was a major part of the developmental program. Those who are much older would understand what the roads were going from Georgetown to Corriverton, and also the whole issue of the bridge, the investment of the Linden-Soesdijk Highway, the Region 3, etc. When you're on a developmental train, infrastructure in terms of movement of goods and services will become important. But I think in terms of what we want to talk about, the food policy and other developmental issues with respect to the old man's leadership and that of the PNC's leadership. I think, I don't think he would prefer to say that all that occurred was as a result of his singular vision. He always emphasized the role of the PNC's leadership in terms of the development of the country. But in discussing some of the food issues that you were mentioning, Dwayne, we have to remember some of the ideological battles that we faced during that period of time, and also the multi-ethnic issue that we had. And so remember, we were coming from a point of building an identity as Guyanese. So all of those issues, even when we came to food, the concept of substitution and the discussion as to whether it should be food substitution as against food replacement. And I always remember Dr. Reed emphasizing this issue, that when you say food substitution, that people tend to believe that it's a food of a lower value versus that of food replacement. And so we had many discussions on those issues. Even when we were having the problems of resources and access to resources, when we were making a decision to go to rice flour and use our own products, even within the party, we had many issues of its acceptability. And so it is not an easy issue that when you look at the leadership in the food policy, it is not that it failed. I thought it ran into challenges as a result of the ideological positions taken, and then also a component with respect to an ethnic challenge to it. But as you look at the infrastructure, I just wanted to say very quickly where we are in the present day environment. Remember, the new resource is a finite resource. So we have an oil economy and a non-oil economy. And therefore, you have to look at the approach that you're taking, because the non-oil economy is more important to develop that, to sustain the growth and development indicators that will emerge under the oil economy. But I know we can discuss many other issues, but I just wanted to make those quick comments.
Thank you very much, Comrade Vice Charles. For persons who will be speaking next, yes, just before Mr. Alexander, for persons who will be speaking next or asking questions, let's ask them to be a bit more brief when it comes to the comments or questions because of time constraints, no other reason. But we allow Mr. Vincent Alexander. We have Comrade Hamilton Green, Comrade Rudy Gayan. We have my brother LeSean there. Yes. Comrade Sampson. Okay, got the questions. Yes,
Permit me to make a few comments on the ongoing discussion. Whenever one talks about development, there are essentially three models one of three models that can be used. The growth pole model, which speaks to infrastructure being developed so as to encourage production. And the whole question of transportation and things like that. Infrastructure to encourage production. So you build harbors so you can have movement. You build roads so you can go to places where resources are. And that's the growth pole approach. There's a community approach where you emphasize local development, local industry, where the people themselves are involved in the local area, trying to produce goods and services for themselves. And then there is a kind of central development where the state takes responsibility and gets involved in economic activities as opposed to the private enterprise. I think the question that we are faced with in Guyana is this. We have infrastructure, but is that infrastructure really driving development? Is it driving development? These roads we are building, are they really roads that are intended to open up areas for manufacturing and things like that. And that's a question we have to ask. And for me, the infrastructure seems to be fantasy development. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I say so. I use a simple example of what I call the second roundabout. The second roundabout. We have spent a lot of money on the second roundabout. And most of the money spent on it is not on the roundabout. It's on the promenade in the middle of the roundabout. And that promenade is a distraction to traffic. It is not functional in terms of the country's development. It's a distraction. People who are driving are distracted because of the beauty of the promenade, the Dubai. But not only that, people are going to the promenade and there is no parking, there is no pedestrian crossing. It's really hazardous. And so here we have infrastructure, which is meaningless in terms of driving any form of development in the society. So that, yes, infrastructure is critical, but it has to be geared towards opening up areas for production and the movement of goods and services. And we don't have evidence that that is in fact what is happening in terms of our infrastructural development. And there is insufficient focus because even though you have these three approaches to development, you could really have a combination of those approaches rather than any one approach dominating. And since we have a time problem, let me close it by saying this. There is nothing wrong with the private sector being the engine of growth. But growth is not development. And therefore, you have to be able to combine the private sector being the engine of growth with the state being the facilitator of development. And what may well be missing in Guyana is the state not necessarily being the facilitator of development because it has left it to the private sector to determine all that takes place in terms of infrastructure, etc., rather than the state regulating the private sector in such a manner as to facilitate development, bearing in mind what are the UN indicators of development.
All right. If I may add my 2 cents to this discussion, I think we have to be careful when we speak about infrastructure because it seems as though there's a tendency to view infrastructure as roads and bridges. It is not. Infrastructure involves schools, hospitals, airports, all the things that help contribute to human quality of life, which is the development side. I think also, and this is, I am responding to my fellow colleague, we have to be careful when we talk about private sector involvement in development, and not to speak about private sector involvement in growth here, but development, because development, as my colleague Dwayne mentioned, is speaking to expanding human capabilities. But in that, it is also speaking to improve quality of life. And improve quality of life has implications for education, health, security, enforcement, administration, and justice, and what's not. Now, if we have institutions that are profit-seeking, which invariably is what your private sector involved in, do we want to end up in a situation like, let's say, as occur in another country where you're sick, you go to the hospital, the only time you could get past the door is if you show your insurance card. As it is right now, I think my thing is that when it comes to the balance between infrastructure and human development, well, it is not a choice, it's how we balance it. It has to be balanced in a manner that should be we should be able to sustain. That's just my 2 cents on it.
And as I give the mic to Comrade Hamilton Green, I will just ask everyone to ask their questions, and then the panelists will just take notes and they will answer all at once after. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Chairman. I stand here to usurp my privilege as I think the oldest person in this place, and one who was present when the People's National Congress was established, and I remain unapologetically a disciple of Forbes Burnham, who would never ever turn my back on this great visionary. I make two comments, if I'm allowed. One, that Burnham understood the significance and the importance of human development. And I congratulate the young presenters and invite them to do some more incisive research. When the first government was established in 1953 under the Waddington Constitution, when for the first time ordinary men were allowed to vote, Burnham, and I was a young Turk then, identified education as the subject of his choice because he understood the importance of human development in the context of a colonial outpost. The second point, as I congratulate the architects of this program, is that to do magnificence to Burnham, when we make another presentation, it needs to be in the context of the vicious conditions of the Cold War. A Cold War which destroyed many countries. I remember as a youngster having held the position then as General Secretary of the People's National Congress. We had intended to invite Kwame Nkrumah as a special guest to our independence celebrations. But in February of the same year, 1966, there was a coup, so he couldn't be present here. I mentioned that because history has a puckish way of repeating itself. And today in Guyana, we have those ambitious people who would undermine the philosophical underpinnings of Burnham to the other side. I hope, therefore, Comrade Alexander, to congratulate you, and hope on the next occasion we can go in depth to the environment that existed when Burnham moved to make this country a great place. It was not easy because the great Sir Winston Churchill in 1946, a year after the Americans dropped the atomic bomb, my wife telling me shut up. But I'm usurping the privilege of an old man. At an address in the presence of Harry S. Truman at Fulton, Missouri, he ignited the Cold War. Burnham in Guyana was a victim of that vicious Cold War. Our young people must understand Burnham's perspicacity for navigating in difficult waters through the Cold War, which ended just when he passed away, and never never, never, never deceive that great man in any way. Thank you.
Panelists, comrades, I want to touch on Dwayne Benjamin's presentation when we talk about food security. Burnham had, I don't know if it was he who said it, but I know for sure that the women's arm of the party had its convention, and we had a theme, produce or perish. And people talked about him riding around Georgetown on a horse, but he made certain that we were able to use up every piece of land we had. When you have grass in front of your house on the parapet, he said, put potato slip. It will kill the grass. You will eat the potatoes, and you can use the leaves of the potato slip as callaloo. And that's only one. I come back, Dwayne, when you talk about the 70s when we had the problem with the oil and we didn't have enough foreign exchange to bring in things like wheat. And when he said we must use what we have, cassava flour, rice flour, you didn't talk about. We got flack for it. But the WRSM had a whole outfit that we refer to as Rice Van, where we specialize in doing different items out of rice. We even had a whole cookbook with recipes from Rice Van. And I want to say that then we were given the flack, and today people talking about rice flour and how good it is and what's not. You check out Nailco. The flour we getting from them, it's mixed with cassava flour and what else? We did it then. And they are doing it now, but we were being demonized in those days. When it came to the fruits, and we're talking about prunes and raisins and currants, and he said, don't bring it, use our carambola and our bilimbi. And as a result of us preserving those fruits, we took it all to the Caribbean. Today, DDL has that 3 counties fruit that we buy to do our Christmas cakes. It was the People's National Congress and the WRSM that promoted it. Yeah? We did exhibitions at Booker's Universal before it became Guyana Stores to show people how to make cookies and to do all the different things. And we did it then, and we can do it now. Plant our yards, plant in the pots, plant in the buckets, and we can be self-sufficient. Produce our parents.
Thank you very much, Robert Sampson. I'll now go to Brother Reed again.
Thank you very much. I'll be as quick as I can, but I would like a resolution where we have within this 100th year of birth, of death, we have one conference every month. Think about it. This needs to continue in this environment. But another thing I didn't plan to say was, and that's another resolution, we have on this campus a fight to have free education. It must be a must. The only way all these talk about development, etc., unless you stress on the development of the human being and our young people, you're going nowhere. So we're fighting that fees will be free. That is our number one fight. We must have free education so we can have a campus life. Without a campus life, we're going nowhere. Oh, so I didn't want to. That's something that I plan to say that. Anyway, concern, and I'll be quick, about 3 or 4 minutes. We talk about Burnham as if Burnham had, in terms of the world power, he may have had status. But I'll tell you where the power was, and then we'll know what to do and how to act. At the independence talk, the real powers were bringing our people together, our politicians together for independence, but what they were doing behind their backs to make the talks fail. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and understand what that means, where the real power was. The second thing, Rashley Jackson, when I talked to him, like he didn't understand too well. Rashley Jackson went to the United Nations and he voted as a free person. And you know what Kissinger said to him? And you could find that in the New York Times if you think I'm just talking. They said, listen, Kissinger said, Ghana will pay for it. And we pay today for it still. Understand where the power is. Secondly, Burnham was mentioned as a president of the student union. We were in the student union. Here you have a president of the whole house committee of the student union. She's sitting there. But let me tell you why I'm saying that. When we were there, America told Burnham was trying to make ends meet. He told him, take off all Sino-Soviet goods off your shelf. That was we were a free country. And you're going to tell me that he said that to the free country. Then who was the power? Why I'm saying all this is that we need more of this. Our professor sitting there, he said, and this is very important, he mentioned Burnham's, what the things that Burnham put out. In our tradition, that's the bar. To really understand what he really is, that Burnham is still batting. And believe me or not, that is not figuratively. To all the professors in here, that is not figurative. That is real. Burnham is batting as long as his bar is being read, as long as his bar is in the libraries. And my book was in the library and I can't find it. It was given to the library in 2006 in this country. And they can't find it. It's called African Radicalism, a cover for blatant self-interest. I have the letter, but the book is not in there. But the point is, Professor says something that is important to every one of us. Burnham is batting still, and he's not saying, he's saying the real thing, and if we understand him, we'll know why is it you must have free education here. Because all the other bars that are in those libraries will be read, will be worked on by our children we're producing. We producing what? For what reason? So, again, how I started, there must be free. Every student coming here must be free so we could get discussions on our issues and we could get a campus life. Because without a campus like this whole country will fail because our youth will not have space to talk. They'll talk by themselves in a corner on a stupid, I shouldn't say stupid, but on a stupid instrument they call a little phone. They're talking to themselves and no growth is going on because no growth in their minds.
Thank you very much. Constraints of time. I see the hands. I've acknowledged a few persons. Now I'm asking you to please be precise, ask your questions to the panelists, giving persons 1 minute. And I know the persons, if I know a person saying 1 minute, yes, we don't have that time to go forward.
Oh my. Good afternoon, everybody, and I'll try to be very brief. Good evening, sorry. Yes. I must say before for me, doing much more study on Burnham, I think he was much more than an intellectual giant within his time. But for me, the more that I study him, I see him as one of those prophetic persons that you would normally read in religious doctrines. So my question is premised on an excerpt from a speech from Burnham, a speech that he did on food security in the region to the Commonwealth Caribbean territories in Georgetown in August 1967. I got this, by the way, from the Village Voice article, if you guys want to pull it up. So I'll just read it very briefly. It says, either we weld ourselves into regional grouping, serving primarily the Caribbean, or have our various territories and nations drawn hither and thither into other large groupings where the particular problems of the Caribbean are lost and where we become the object of neo-colonialist exploitation and achieve the pitiable status of international mandinkans. So hither and thither and mandinkans are not within my everyday vocabulary, so I had to look those words up. So I'll just reread that for those of whom are like myself in the actual definition of those words. So it says, either we weld ourselves into a regional grouping serving primarily the Caribbean, or have our various territories and nations drawn to or towards this place and to or towards that place into other large groupings where the particular problems of the Caribbean are lost and where we become the object of neo-colonialist exploitation and achieve the pitiable status of international beggars. The more and more that I look at the words, including this excerpt from that great leader, I'm put in a place where I have to look deeper beyond what the mere words are saying. And I'm coming to the question. And the thing is that I'm trying to read this in the context of, I know my brother in the front seat talked about having the right context of time, where he talked about the Cold War, but I would like to take that back, not only the Cold War, but post-colonialization and also post-slavery. And it talked about the particular problem of the Caribbean. And I look at that and I ask myself, what is that particular problem that exists within the Caribbean? And for me, when I look at these words and I look even beyond the mere meaning of these words, I can see that the particular problem is what we still face today as Black people coming out from this context of post-slavery, post-colonization, and also the Cold War. Yes, war. So with that being said, my question is, how can we as Black people, not being distracted where we talked about being pulled in these various directions in these large groupings and not focusing on the problems that still are prevalent today amongst Black people that give rise to the stereotypes that are attributed to us? What system and structure can we put in place where we can take the structure that Burnham has implemented? And when I studied, the structure was designed to instill within Black people particularly that which that has been stolen from us and that which even to this present day we are trying to regain, which is a form identity of ourselves and also the basic rudiments and mindset that will bring us together collectively as a people in order for us to overcome the problems that we presently face contemporary. So what are the structures can we put in place to take the structure that Burnham has already implemented into the new age where we can rightfully say that we have accomplished full and complete liberation as Black people?
Thank you very much. Because of authorities beyond my authority, unfortunately, I can't take any more questions or comments. I'm apologizing to all those who put their hands up who I know would ask pertinent questions, but as I said, authority above my authority. And I now go to the panelists to bring this to a close.
Just two comments I would like to make. And I would like to respond to former Mayor Mr. Hamilton Green. I have no quarrel with you about the role of the Cold War and Guyanese politics during the Burnham era. In fact, I might go as far as to say that one of
kingdom and all other things should follow. And we need to go back to analysis as to whether that is correct or not. Which kingdom should we inherit, the political or the economic, or in order to be able to determine what really happens. Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the end of this program. I hope persons All right, so as we advised, we come to the end of the program. I'm thanking everyone here for being here tonight, to listening to the presentations, of course, the panelists, and of course, giving your own contributions. We have some snacks and light refreshments at the back. Do enjoy the rest of your evening and look forward for more activities from the Burnham Centenary Committee. Thank you. You can take the snacks away, of course.
Audio Jungle.